I know someone who's got a major problem with addiction, quite a close friend, and they've had multiple addiction problems at various times. A lot of problems with cocaine, but more specifically with alcohol. A lot of alcohol problems. They're not drinking right now, but a lot of the behaviour is still very similar to how it was when they were drinking and when they were still using quite a bit. In fact, I think it's got a name. It's referred to as a dry drunk. I think the actual pattern of behaviour that occurs, that's very similar to behaviour that's, well, yeah. And I've done quite a bit of research about alcoholism and addiction, and looked at it quite a bit just to see if I can understand it a bit better. And I have gained quite a bit of insight and quite a bit of compassion as a result of that, I think. But some things have surprised me about it, not about the research, but about my responses to it. You know, I've read quite a bit of the neuroscience of it. There's some evidence that the reward circuit in the brain is slightly dysfunctional. I know there's quite a bit of genetic evidence that it has some that the predisposition for alcoholism and abuse runs in families. I know there's a lot of kind of psychosocial factors at work there. There's some interesting things which come out of game and script theory. I know Eric Byrne's written about this. This is the guy who wrote Games People Play. He wrote another version of that called Games Alcoholics Play, drawing out some of the patterns of behaviour, the kind of routines and scripted routines and games that people who are alcoholics tend to engage in, social games. And all that's been really interesting. All that reading has been very, as I say, very compelling, very instructive. But what all that stuff really lacks, at least has lacked for me anyway, is any kind of predictive power. It hasn't given me any greater ability to predict what the person is going to do next, to kind of make a kind of conciliant image of that person's behaviour, to make it seem like it has a coherent structure to it. Phoebe, Guy, this way, come on. Dog coming down his way. But in fact, the only strategy I've found for making those kind of predictions and having that kind of coherent structure for understanding the alcoholic behaviour is one that sounds mad when I think about it, but it's very, at least for me, it's quite powerful. And this is a kind of possession model. I mean, no one talks about possession or takes the idea of possession seriously, and I think quite rightly so. But just as a model, the idea of alcoholism as a form of possession by some kind of spirit works enormously well for me, actually, and as I say, it gives it predictive power. If I imagine this person as possessed, that it has this kind of spirit inside them, it has this personality which wants certain things, then that enables me to understand it in a way which is coherent. And the things that it wants are actually very specific. And I think I may have read this, something like this, somewhere in some of the alcoholic literature, which is that the alcoholism, this little sprite that lives inside this person, it wants them on their own, and it wants them dead. That's the bottom line. It wants to put them in a very dangerous position. It wants to separate them from support networks. It wants to deprive them of the things that a human being needs to stay happy and healthy, and then it wants to kill them. And if I think in terms of those things, a lot of behaviour makes complete sense and is predictable. Financial choices, career choices, relationship choices, housing choices, choices about where to go on holiday, choices about what kinds of things to buy, choices about, well, everything really. Lots and lots of things flow out of that simple image. It doesn't make it right, of course. I mean, as I say, I'm not seriously suggesting that alcoholism is demonic possession, but all I'm saying is that it works enormously well as a predictive tool. That's all I'm saying, really.